Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 18 of Own the Road with AutoTrader, where we make car stuff simple for Canadians. My name is Jodi, and I am AutoTrader's editor-in-chief.
And I am Dan Alika, AutoTrader's road test editor.
And our special guest today is my grumbly stomach.
It's true.
Apologies in advance if you hear it on the podcast. I'm very hungry
She
today.
hasn't mic'd up separately.
So, unfortunately, this is our last episode for the year. It's been so crazy how fast this year has just disappeared. We started this podcast in April, I think.
Sure.
And we're 18 episodes deep, and we're closing the year.
I felt pretty good, actually. I bumped into Ralph Gilles, who longtime listeners will remember as our guest in the early days. Canadian, good guy, head of design for North America for Stellantis, which is, Chrysler, Ram, Dodge, all those brands. Anyways, I bumped into him during the LA Auto Show.
Oh.
And the first thing he said to me was, "Man, that was so much fun. When are you guys going to have me back?" And I was like,
Ralph, you can come back anytime.
Totally. And B, it's like we loved having him on. So it's always good when a guest says that they had a good time too and seem to actually mean it.
It's always nice when they have fun because I feel like I have tons of fun doing this podcast with you. It's definitely one of the highlights.
Agreed.
And so it's really nice when other people
Remember when I had
get that vibe.
COVID and it was like we were like, oh man, no podcast for 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's
sad.
right. But we've been pretty consistent up until
Totally.
now. But yeah, this is the last episode of the season. So
I'm going on vacation.
I know Dan's leaving next week for Jamaica.
I'm going to go lay on a beach for 10 days.
I'm going to be here in our studio in Toronto crying.
Oh, the only thing, I'm going to be crying while I'm there. 2 days.
Why? Because the jerk chicken will be too hot.
No,
you don't eat meat.
No, because the Bills. I'm going to miss 2 Bills games.
Anytime Dan talks about sports, I just take a mental nap.
Wow. Harsh. The truth is coming out.
I really don't care about sports at all.
Yeah, but this isn't sports. This is life.
Anyway, so we have a lot to go through today. I kind of want to recap the year, but we're going to play a little game. So Dan hasn't seen these questions before. So pick a number between 1 and 10, and each number corresponds to a different secret question that I'll ask you.
All right, let's say I'm not, they always 7 or 3 are the ones that people usually go with. So let's go with 8.
8, okay. Yeah. Is there a car you really wanted to drive this year but didn't?
Wow, that's a good question. I feel like there is too, and I can't. Oh, a weird one is the Honda CR-V. And it's ironic because I was supposed to drive it and then it wasn't ready in time. So now Jodi is going to take my booking while I'm on vacation. But that one is something that
so relevant to the market, and it's built in Canada.
Built in Canada, extremely popular, extremely important.
Yep.
The hybrid is now coming to Canada, and I was really looking forward to driving that. Unfortunately, Honda Canada just doesn't do the events the way they used to, so we don't get that early shot. And that's the thing, right? Is Jodi and I have talked about this at length, but to give you guys a little kind of peek behind the curtain is honestly doing the events. It's not the travel. I don't love being away from home. I don't love being away from Becky and my cats and all that stuff. But it really is that opportunity to get out ahead, right? And drive the cars early so that, because we get questions all the time, especially when it comes to popular vehicles like the CR-V. And I hate not being able to say to people, oh yeah, I've driven it and here's what I think. Especially when I see them cruising around on the public roads.
Yeah, I mean, no worries, though. I'm driving it next week, so we'll have a review for you guys on YouTube. It'll be me hosting instead of Dan. Deal with it. I
mean, I think people are stoked. But anyways, no, that's the car that I...
Good one.
That I, even though it's not... I know we also had that debate. This is the airing... It's not a grievances, but it's the things that, we disagree on. Jodi is fine calling crossovers cars. Which I understand the logic. She calls it the fingers and thumbs.
Yeah, because all crossovers are... Sorry, how does it go?
You said all crossovers are cars, but not all cars are crossovers.
Correct.
But my thing is they're distinct. Anyways.
I know. I just feel like that's an old school way of looking at it, but I totally get both sides. I think for me, the car that I wanted to drive this year, but I didn't, is the Supra. I've never driven a Supra in my life.
Really?
Yeah, and I've always wanted
man.
to, and I never got the chance to.
I drove the manual one a couple weeks ago
And you
on the
loved it.
racetrack, and it was everything that you kind of hoped would be. But the thing that I always say now is buy it. All of you people out there, yes, I'm pointing fingers, that said, oh, the Supra's back and it's stupid that it's automatic only. Okay, put your money where your mouth is.
Shots fired.
Yeah, well, it's just I wrote a rant about this last year, I think, where it's like, come on, guys, you're allowed to complain, but then when automakers serve up exactly what you've asked for, if you don't follow through and buy it,
Yeah.
then they're not going to do it again.
Yeah, and then you'll all complain when it gets discontinued. So you got to put your money where your mouth is, right?
You really do.
So you pick a number between 1 and 10 for me.
No, you pick a number and then I ask you the question.
No, but I know the questions. You have to pick a number, and I'll ask myself the question.
Wow, weird flex,
I know.
Jodes. Let's go with number 1 because you're my number 1 friend.
Oh, thank you, Dan. Number 1 says, what was an automotive highlight for the year?
Well, that's a good one.
That is a good one. I think for me, there was one major one that stands out is I drove the Porsche 911 GT3 Touring earlier in the year.
Cool car.
And why that was so significant for me is because that is a car that I've been dreaming about driving since I was a child. That's the one for me where it was the posters on my wall. I was obsessed with 911s growing up. So that was just a really cool thing to drive your dream car. I literally cried about it.
It's a cool car.
Yeah, and it was manual, and it was just so gorgeously satisfying to drive. But it's just cool, meeting your heroes, meeting that icon that you've always dreamt of. So that was a really big one for me.
For me, I would say, I don't know, there's been a lot. Maybe testing Super Cruise down in California, which is GM's hands-free adaptive cruise control with the automatic lane change functionality. Now you can tow with it. That's really
crazy cool.
And I wouldn't call myself a skeptic, but full autonomy, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think it's ever going to come to fruition. But these systems that work on divided highways and work really well. Mm-hmm. I've driven other systems that do feel like they're kind of ping-ponging you between lane markings or just not quite as, I don't know, I'm not quite as comfortable with them as I'd like to be. Whereas Super Cruise, I was immediately, it just was really reassuring. It felt like it was in control. It felt like it was watching me. And it was really quick to say, hey, keep your eyes. I intentionally, obviously it's part of my job to try to see how the system reacts. And it was very quick to respond when I looked away. The lane changes were seamless. And we'll also do it, you can set it to respond to signal inputs, or it'll just do it on its own.
That's so cool.
Which is so cool. It'll approach slower traffic. And I think so many of you out there need it, because if you heard our last or 2 episodes ago, our rant about all the bad things that we see on the roads, people who left lane bandit, Super Cruise will immediately move you back into the center lane when it's safe to do so. So
that's the way it should be.
so I was a big fan of that.
Let's do one more of these mystery questions before we move on. So pick a number between 1 and 10.
Let's go 5.
5. This one. What was the biggest automotive letdown of this year?
Toyota Corolla Cross. Is that was this year? Technically, I think?
You drove it this year.
Yeah.
I could see that, mostly because it was so slow.
So gutless. Everything else about it, well, not everything else was good. Most things about it were good. I found it could have been a little bit better in terms of some features and stuff. But yeah, the big one is the engine. And I really hope, if we're going to look at, we'll spin this into a positive and say, with 2023 around the corner, Corolla Cross Hybrid coming out, I think that could be the savior that the Corolla Cross needs. Not necessarily that it's going to be any quicker, but that at least you'll feel like there's a reason it's so slow.
Yeah, for sure. Because if something is more efficient, I almost don't mind that it's slow.
Totally, yeah.
But yeah,
that was a big disappointment.
The Corolla Cross for me, it was so buzzy and.
I remember I drove it and I complained to you, and you were like, "How bad could it really be?" And then you picked it up and you messaged me, and we're like, "Oh boy, this thing."
I know. I normally don't
turtle.
complain about cars being slow, but this was next level slow. like just getting up to highway speeds made me nervous.
Scary.
That's how slow it was.
Passing on the highway was, or moving. Like, let's say I was on the highway and I wanted to get out of the right lane to give people merging room, because you guys should all be doing that. It was like scary to move into the middle lane and not feel like you were disrupting everyone else's day.
Yeah, I totally feel that. That's a very legit choice.
Yeah. What about you? What was your biggest disappointment?
I'm not really sure. That's a good question. I typically approach all the cars I drive with like a very open mind. So I try not to make my mind make it up about something before I actually drive it. And I can honestly say, like, besides the Corolla Cross, I haven't really been that let down by anything. I think most cars today, for what their intended purpose is, like, nail it.
I agree. I think, people, it's a lot of nitpicking. That's why when it comes to the Corolla Cross thing, that really does come down to like a safety and comfort issue. It's not, griping that, because I do not think that, I think most vehicles are too quick these days.
I agree.
But it's like, this is like, really bad. Even if you look at, like Jeep just announced that the Compass is getting a turbo motor, because that thing is
That
really
one was
gutless.
also very slow.
Subaru put the 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, and you can still get the 2, and I wouldn't recommend it. But so you see automakers addressing those issues, and they're not like worlds quicker, but they're as quick as they should be in today's, because with everyone else driving quicker, again, it comes down to merging and passing and that sort of stuff.
It becomes a safety thing, not like a speed demon thing, right? So it's nice when automakers are listening to the people who buy their vehicles, and kind of address those complaints.
Speaking of...
What?
Lexus UX. Well, the whole Lexus lineup. We talked about that.
Oh, yeah. So Lexus previously used to use this really terrible infotainment interface where it operated like a kind of like an old trackpad on an old laptop, except it was even more annoying and jumpy to use and impossible to use safely while you were driving.
Yeah.
So even to do something like change the radio station, you would have to like use this little trackpad, and it was so bad, and they had no touchscreen at that time, and it was so bad that I literally could not recommend those cars because that system was so distracting.
Or the crossovers.
Yes. But Lexus listened to everybody, and they addressed that. So now they have a touchscreen.
Yeah.
And immediately that one little change took those vehicles from being unrecommendable to like some of the best in the segment.
You were really big on the NX that came out for 2022.
Yeah, I used to hate that. And now it came out with that new infotainment system, and it was like one of my favorite ones now.
And Andy Lynn, our production editor, he bought one. The hybrid, too.
He bought the hybrid, yeah.
The plug-in hybrid, the 450H+.
Yeah.
I don't know. They still got to do something about the naming convention, but one thing at a time.
I mean, that was a really nice improvement.
But anyways, Andy liked it so much, they went out and bought one a few months ago.
It's so good.
And love it.
All around, really great vehicle.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. So the other thing that happens this time of year is AutoTrader comes out with its top search data.
Oh, yeah, it's very interesting.
It's very interesting to me, the types of data. So, like, obviously, AutoTrader, the marketplace, is, like, the biggest one there is in the whole country. And so we capture a lot of interesting data about what everyone is searching for, which I think is really, really cool. And so the top 10 list for this year, should I just go through the whole top 10 and then we'll kind of pick it apart?
Sure, yeah, why not?
So number one top searched vehicle in the whole country for 2022 is the Ford F-150.
Go figure. That's
not
also
a big surprise.
The number one selling vehicle in the whole country.
And I think since we've been collecting this data, I think it's been like 7 or 8 years, the Ford F-150 has been the top spot every single time.
Makes sense.
The year that it's not up there will be like an earth-shattering event because it's been so consistently number one.
And the new versions, like the thing that I like is you see, not car companies, but just in general, right? You see a lot of companies kind of rest on their laurels a little bit when they're leading. So you take a look at, I don't know, like BlackBerry, I think is a great example, right? Where everyone had BlackBerries, everyone loved BBM. BlackBerry kind of, let its guard down a bit, and now, the company's still big in the automotive space,
right.
Doing tech, but
not in the consumer
not in
space.
Consumer electronics, smartphones, it's gone, right?
Yeah.
And Ford isn't going down that route. So if you take a look, like the F-150 hybrid is really good. The F-150 Lightning, which is the all-electric one, is great. I just reviewed that one. The review is up on our YouTube channel as well as autotrader.ca/editorial. I think it's the most important vehicle of my lifetime.
That's a big statement to make.
And I think it's so huge. It's going to help shift perceptions of EVs. Those that are into them already are going to be like, cool, there's a truck. Those who aren't are going to see how kind of easy the shift to electrification is.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Especially because it looks and feels just like a regular F-150, except like kind of way better in certain areas. Like it's not for everybody, but I like how seamless the transition was. But the number 2 most searched vehicle is the Honda Civic, which is interesting because last year it was number 6. So it jumped up a couple spaces for this year.
Probably we'd have to look back at the data from when the last generation Civic came out, but I wonder if that has to do with it, with a new one arriving for 2022 that's really good.
We also kind of thought that because fuel prices and car prices got so high this year, that some of the choices were a lot more practical and efficient.
Totally.
And
that
more
is
affordable.
hilarious though, right? You see it, it's like, the pendulum swing all the time. Just not even like the search data, but conversationally, or even you see it in your neighbors' driveways where it's like gas is cheap. Everyone goes out and buys trucks.
Yeah, so interesting. So I'm going to share a bunch of interesting data that we pulled from this year's results. So like in March, when gas prices just like skyrocketed, searches for EVs on the AutoTrader marketplace went up by 89%.
That's wild.
Which is so high. And we did a survey, and 68% of the Canadian consumers that we surveyed said that they would be willing to consider an EV as their next car, which is massive.
Makes me happy.
And check this out. In March, the number of car shoppers inquiring about buying a new EV through AutoTrader increased 567%.
Jeez, nearly 6 times.
Isn't that wild?
That's crazy.
And I think that is so interesting because it really shows you how those like huge, economic factors affect how people are searching for cars.
I remember I bought that antique locker this week, and I sent you the photo of it. It was really cool. I went up and met the guy in just near Barrie. Anyways, he was driving a Ford Super Duty diesel. And he told me, and granted, he does run like a landscaping company, but he said his truck, he was spending $850 a week to fuel his truck.
That's brutal. And like my car is a diesel and it's a Golf. And so those high diesel prices, because diesel prices right now are even more expensive than gas prices. And so it's like killing me. But I'll just go through the rest of the list. I'll run it through. Number 3, BMW 3 Series, Ford Mustang, Mercedes AMG C-Class, Porsche 911.
Wait, can we stop at the C-Class? Because that's interesting to me because last year it was the regular C-Class.
In 5th place as well.
In 5th place. This year it was the AMG version, which for those of you who don't know is like the performance version. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, and so the top 10 is always very interesting to me because there are a lot of very luxurious, like high dollar cars in our top 10 every year. And I think that's just so interesting because it really shows you that what people are searching for is not necessarily what they're buying. And so if you're anything like me and Dan, like we use the AutoTrader marketplace all the time just to like look for cool stuff.
Totally,
like, oh, could I afford my dream Porsche 911? The answer is no. But
I
look into it all the time.
No.
But yeah, the Porsche 911 is number 6. Last year it was number 4. Then we have the RAV4, and then number 8 is the Mercedes E-Class.
That one's really fascinating. Like the E-Class is good, but that one, if you were to ask me to predict the top 10, a lot of these I would be like, I think I would be on the nose.
The E-Class is a big surprise because you don't see very many of them out in the wild. Like a 911, I could totally understand because it's like the quintessential dream car.
Well, and that's why you would think like a Mercedes S-Class would be on this list instead of an E-Class.
Really?
I would get if I were guessing.
I would say like a G-Wagon. I feel like a G-Wagon is like the dream car.
You and Carl, our VP of Consumer Marketing here, big G-Wagon fans, and I think it's the most overrated vehicle
I think
sold
you're
in Canada.
right, but I like it because it's
so
stupid.
extra.
Yeah, for me, it's like just give me a box on wheels.
Well, that's
Even
what
the
it
Kia
is.
Soul, I love the Kia Soul because it is a box on wheels.
Yeah, the Kia Soul is cool.
It's a great little car. Even the EV one, I love it.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then rounding out our top 10 most searched for the year is the Corvette and the Jeep Wrangler.
See, again, those make like you. I don't think those ones would be a surprise to anyone.
Yeah.
Right? The Jeep Wrangler is extremely popular. The
Everyone
Corvette
loves
is cool.
It's another one of those dream cars. Also, although the
Yeah.
Corvette is like a more attainable dream car for a lot of
Totally.
people.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because the Jeep Wrangler displaced the BMW M cars from 10th place from last year, which is very interesting.
Best retained value, like maybe ever. It's crazy. Jeep Wranglers
Yeah.
sell for astronomical prices still. My buddy has one that we joke about it all the time because he's asking, like, I don't know, it's got to be like a 2002 or something like that. And he has it listed for like, I don't know, like $8,000. And I'm like, that's crazy. And he's
Is it
still,
like bone stock or did he build it up?
no, it's like, it's a Rubicon, but it's not like, it's not built, and it's still like, you know, and it's got 300,000 kilometers on it, and
wow.
like, but he gets like tire kickers on it that are still like within spitting distance, and he's like a real like stickler, so he's not in a rush to sell it, but it blows my mind
Yeah.
every time I see these prices.
I mean, if we want to talk about car prices, we could do a whole other episode on that. We also
Let's
have
do it.
tons of data on car prices. Like AutoTrader puts out a quarterly price index, really insightful to what's happening in the industry. So we can go through that in another episode. The other thing that's really interesting to me about this data is the provincial breakdown.
Oh yeah,
So in BC, there's way more luxury cars than any other province, which is kind
Unsurprising.
of not a surprise.
yeah.
In Quebec, it is the only province where the F-150 is not number one top searched.
Yeah. But also this, Alberta and Saskatchewan are the only province where the Civic is not in the top 3.
It's because trucks.
Drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like,
Take it from
Alberta
a guy who
and
lived in
Saskatchewan?
Alberta and drove an F-150.
I know. So it's not a secret that, you know, Canadian drivers in Alberta and Saskatchewan love their trucks.
My good friend, Mike Sutherland Shaw, we worked at a newspaper in northern Alberta together, and he drove a Toyota Corolla, and he felt not like emasculated, just like so out of place.
Because everyone else has enormous trucks.
And the other
around
guys
you.
at the paper, in fairness, like even one of our colleagues, Kirsten Gorick, she drove a Ford Fiesta, which was like, you know, I mean, that's a small car, and it just looked even smaller compared to everything else on the road. Anyways, it was just kind of funny. But yeah, Mike, he's another Ontario guy, so when we were out there, he always felt so out of place.
I can understand that. That makes sense
Yeah.
to me. And then the last interesting tidbit of information from our top search data is that the Maritimes have no luxury vehicles in their top 10 most searched.
You know what? I think people may read into that the wrong way. I'm going to tell you what it comes down to is sensibility.
Yeah.
It to me,
They're
it's
a very practical bunch of people.
absolutely. It's like, yeah, I mean, you go to, you know, Halifax or St. John's, like you'll see people cruising around in Mercedes and Lexus and whatever, but, you know, people kind of, I don't even want to say like live within their means. It's just like, hey, why would I overspend on a vehicle that doesn't really do anything for me, right?
And it's true. And so it's funny because a while ago I was out east test driving a Mercedes SUV of some sort. I don't remember which one. And it was really interesting.
Oh, it was the GLE out on that island.
Fogo Island.
Fogo
yeah,
Island.
yeah, you're right. Yeah. So, wow, you have a better memory than I do. That's
know.
amazing. But anyway, the sticker price for the vehicles we were testing, higher than some homes you can buy there, which is, you know, why I think when you look at the perspective, like, why would I buy a car when I could buy a whole house?
Totally. And then, I don't know, you see like, you know, Becky's uncles that live in Cape Breton, like some of them drive trucks because they need them. That's not a luxury item.
It's not a vanity thing. It's
No.
like they're working. They're hardworking trucks.
It's like, I need this truck
Yeah.
because it helps me do my job, right? So I do think it comes down to like sensibility and practicality over anything else. Because trust me, like, you know, some of the homes out there, some of the, you know, it's not like they're scraping by. It's like,
Yeah.
it's just like the rest of the country.
They're just very sensible.
It's just sensible,
Yeah.
sensible people.
Another interesting data point is that so in October of 2022, there were 12,600 new and used EVs on the AutoTrader marketplace, which is a 52.7 increase over the same time last year. So I think it's very cool that obviously there have been more EVs to come out this year, and so the inventory is higher than ever. But yeah, a lot of people don't know that you can find new and used vehicles on AutoTrader.
Yeah.
And so I always want to put that out there.
Trickle down economics, folks.
Yeah.
People, you had the early adopters that are, probably ready to upgrade to something newer, so they're going to sell their. And the thing that I always say, by and large, I'm confident in saying that EVs are generally going to age better than their gas-powered, counterparts, simply based on the parts that they use. Right? There's not as many, mechanical parts that are going to fail.
Less can go wrong.
Yeah. You take a look at brakes. With regenerative braking, you're not often using the mechanical brakes, so that's another thing that you're not going to see replaced or worn down in the same way. So yeah, I think if you're looking at let's say a 4 or 5 year old EV, chances are it's still going to be in really good shape.
Right.
And you're going to start to see those hitting the market now. Times are
very
times
cool
are good.
option for a lot of people, especially because new EVs they're priced right now in a way that puts them off a lot of people's shopping lists because they are expensive. So it is nice that there are a lot more used ones on the marketplace. So anyway, AutoTrader's top search data, always fascinating to dig through. I think that stuff is so cool. And then I kind of wanted to talk about our awards. So we don't announce our AutoTrader Awards for 2023.
Do you mean the most comprehensive awards in Canada?
And the most trusted.
Wow.
And we did a survey about it. I didn't make it up. That is a third-party survey that proved that the AutoTrader Awards are the most trusted automotive awards in the country. And honestly, I'm so proud of that fact because we built this thing up and it's one of the most important things that I get to work on. So I love the awards. So basically, we will announce the awards or the winners for the awards in February of 2023. We have basically an award for every single body style category in existence.
It's a lot.
Except for supercars because we're also practical minded people.
Yes.
And the awards are a little bit different because basically any car that's available for Canadians to buy is considered. A lot of awards only consider vehicles that were new or significantly changed for the year, but we're looking at everything that. We're considering over 350 cars in 32 different categories.
And the logic is simple, right? It's you're not, as the average consumer, let's say you're shopping for a compact car, you're not just going, hey, what's the newest one? You're
going, know
what's the best one? And that's why we look at it that way.
Yeah, and so we have we've got over 20 of, I think, some of Canada's best automotive journalists.
Shout him out. We got Brendan McAleer, who's probably
the most talented
writer in Canada. We've got Jill McIntosh.
Sammy Hadjisad,
who's an award-winning writer. We have so many great writers, and I don't want to leave anyone out. Jill McIntosh, Peter Bleakney,
Jeff Wilson,
Matt St. Pierre. We have so many
Vincent Obey.
Oh my gosh.
From all over the country, east to west. We've got experts voting on our awards. And so, I'm really proud of it. So just stay tuned for when we announce the winners. In February, we have categories for best EV, best plug-in hybrid, best trucks, basically any body style you can think of. We've got it.
Price caps that are relevant. We try to
super excited.
Performance cars. We've got mainstream performance. We've got luxury performance. It's really cool.
Yeah, and it's so much work to do because I take a lot of pride in how comprehensive these awards are.
You don't say.
Yeah, but the whole reason why we do this is to help you out when you're in your car buying process. We know that a lot of people don't really know what's out there. So by having a whole bunch of experts kind of vote on which ones they'd feel the most confident recommending to their family and friends might give you a good jumping off point for your research.
It's also interesting, and we'll get into it once we actually do that episode, but even for us, and it shows you that it is like a democratic process, because sometimes I look at like not how each person has voted, but the outcome of the categories, and I'm like, well, I wouldn't have picked that as
Well, and I think it's good because not everyone is looking at things from the same lens.
Well, and it's also, that means Jodi and I aren't like imposing our wills upon the awards.
No, it is truly a democratic process.
Yeah.
Like sometimes, you don't agree with the winners, but that's not the point. The point is that this is like collectively what a bunch of people have picked.
A bunch of knowledgeable, experienced, good people.
Yeah, and some of these people have been reviewing cars for like 20 or 30 years. So we have hundreds of years of experience divided between all of our experts. So definitely tune in February when we announce those winners. I'm super, super excited for that. But today we have an Ask an Expert question. Okay. It comes from Gary from Peterborough.
Okay.
So, hi, Jodi and Dan. Catching up on your podcast, I just listened to the favorite cars from movies and pop culture episode.
Yeah.
I was waiting for Transformers to come up, but maybe that needs its own episode. The live-action movies, of course, helped relaunch the Camaro as Bumblebee, but also as a child of the late 70s and early 80s, with the cartoon and toys is how I became interested in cars, with the originals being based on real vehicles and race cars. As an adult, I've learned a bit about the early engineers' love of auto racing and real cars they were based on, like the Martini Porsche 935, which I thought was such a cool car. There was also an F1 car based on a real-world race car as well. Were either of you Transformers fans or had additional influences besides what you've talked about that fueled your love of cars?
Wow. Well, Gary, I appreciate. I always love when listeners share kind of their story, right? Either whether what got them into cars or what's kept them into cars or whatever. I will say, and Jodi knows this about me, I'm not much of a movie guy, aside from ones I've already seen 8,000 times.
He watches the same 5 movies
over and over. So I am going to be a big letdown here and admit that I've never seen any Transformers movie.
Wow.
It's just not something that I've
seen all of them. And I think the cars are a really cool part of it.
I remember the cartoon, though.
Yeah, and that's the one he was talking about.
I know, that's the thing, but it's just like we're talking about movies here.
Pop culture in general, right? So, like, yeah, I don't know if there was any, like, shows or movies that really fueled my love of cars. I've loved cars since I was a kid, and it probably had to do with the fact that both of my parents were really into cars, so that really affected me growing up.
For me, it wasn't necessarily like shows or movies, but like Hot Wheels. I was one of those kids,
and you still are.
I still am, for sure. I just found like it. Jodi asked me about that. Do I order them online? And it's like, no, not really, because I like the thrill of the hunt. I love being like, there's this one specific car, and if I'm in the store, I'll take a look, and if I find it, it's like still just as exciting as when I was a kid. Only now I don't have to beg my parents to buy them for me.
They're also like $1, right?
Well, the premium ones, those are my jam, and those are like, $8 or $10 a piece.
Inflation, guys, it's real.
Just for some rubber tires on a Hot Wheels, it's kind of embarrassing.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gary, so much for your question. That was just a really fun question.
Yeah.
If any of you would like to ask Dan or I questions, car-related or personal or whatever, you can email expert@trader.ca. We honestly love to get your questions.
We really do.
Even if they're not questions, like even if you just wanted to talk about, what got you into cars, or like a fun car memory you had, or something that really makes you mad when you're out driving, please email us at expert@trader.ca. It makes me so happy to get these emails.
Yeah.
And that's it for the year. Thank you so much for joining us this year on On the Road with AutoTrader. We really love to do this podcast.
It's true.
And we're just so grateful for all of your support. So if you wanted to support us more, there's a couple ways you could do it. One is to tell all your family and friends about On the Road with AutoTrader. Share it with people, because we think that it's very helpful information, and we love to get the word out,
Yeah. Subscribe, rate the podcast,
leave a review, give it 5 stars. There's so many, little ways that we would really appreciate it. But thank you so much. This has been the most fun.
It has been. It's been a blast. Anyways, I'm off to Jamaica.
Bye, Dan.
See ya.
We'll see everyone in January with a bunch of new episodes.